Adventures with Dice. Welcome back to Adventures with Dice. I'm Rob, and I'm your host for these videos. And in today's video, we're going to have another versus match. And in this versus match, we're going to be looking at the Dungeons & Dragons Rule Cyclopedia versus Basic Fantasy role-playing game. Okay, so I've already done a video on the Rule Cyclopedia. You can go watch and see what all it is. It's a culmination of the BECMID box sets, kind of reorganized into one book with art that is, in my opinion, inferior to the original box sets, but the book is fantastic and very usable. So let me go ahead and get a disclaimer out of the way. I don't do these versus videos to bash one system over the other. That is really not my intent in these videos. It's more to illustrate the differences between two similar products. So I'm going to be doing it a little bit differently than I have done in the past. I'm going to be doing a point system on the different things in the books, and you'll see how that goes as we go on. But for those of you who don't watch the whole video, but like to base your opinions off of things early on and then make comments, let me assure you that this is not a bashing Basic Fantasy over the Rule Cyclopedia or vice versa. These are both fantastic books, and they both offer very specific things that are really good for playing old school D&D. This is just my opinion. Well, some of it's my opinion, some of it's fact over the differences between the two. And all I'm trying to do is illustrate that so you, as a potential consumer and gamer, can decide which one you would like to pick up. So what I have here is, this is the third edition hardback of the Basic Fantasy rulebook and the hardback of the Rule Cyclopedia. Both of these can be purchased in softback as well. And there's a fourth edition of this now for the Basic Fantasy, but it's all completely compatible. So, but for the purposes of this video, I am basing everything off of my third edition copy that I have. So both copies, both books can be purchased in hardback. The hardback for the Rule Cyclopedia at time of filming is $32. The hardback for Basic Fantasy is $17. So Basic Fantasy is going to score 1 point right off the bat there. The soft cover version of the Rule Cyclopedia is $27. The soft cover of Basic Fantasy is $9. So again, Basic Fantasy is going to get the point. All right, so complete game. Both of these offer a complete game. No matter how you look at it, you can take just this book either way and play the game as you don't have to buy anything else for it. So they're both going to get a point here. Basic Fantasy goes up to 3, and we're up to 1 on the Rule Cyclopedia. So does the game offer a built-in skill system? There's not really a skill system in Basic Fantasy. There's a way to represent a skill system, but it's very kind of loose. Roll on this table. It is not as robust as the skill system that is in the Rule Cyclopedia. So the Rule Cyclopedia is going to get the point on that one. All right, let's see. The next thing is free version. Is there a free version of the Rule Cyclopedia? Not legally, no. And I am not advocating for piracy, but it's $10 for the PDF for this. However, Basic Fantasy, just like all of their books, does have a free version. You can get this exact book for free, so it goes up. We're 4-2 right now. All right, so now page count, which is going to give us an idea of how much content we're getting. Basic Fantasy 3rd edition weighs in at 164 pages, whereas the Rule Cyclopedia weighs in at 304 pages. So they get the point on that one. Characters and level options. So in basic fantasy, you have the cleric, fighter, magic user, and thief, all that go up to level 20. In the Rule Cyclopedia, you have the cleric, which also has the druid option up to level 36. You have the fighter, which also, after level 9, has the paladin, knight, or avenger option up to level 36. You have the magic user up to level 36, the thief up to level 36, the dwarf, which is a combination fighter with special abilities that the dwarves have, level 12 plus, and then you have the elf, level 10 plus, which is a combination basically of a fighter and magic user, and then you have the halfling, which is level 8 plus, and you have the mystic, which is goes up to level 16. Now, that being said, there is an option in the back in this book to just use the regular XP charts and take all of these classes to level 36 if you choose to. So, option-wise, Rule Cyclopedia is actually going to get it on this one. So, if I can find a 4. Boom, they are now tied. All right, so spells. Spells, both of these games use the Vancian magic system. You have in basic fantasy an optional 48 cleric spells and 68 magic user spells. Let's just go back. Cleric spells, you have 48 in basic fantasy. In the Rule Cyclopedia, you have 56. Magic user, you have 68 in basic fantasy and 117 in Rule Cyclopedia. And then the Rule Cyclopedia also includes another 28 spells for the druid. So Rule Cyclopedia takes the lead at 5-4. Equipment sections. There is in the Rule Cyclopedia, a massive equipment section with expanded info on vehicles and siege weapons. The equipment section is decent in basic fantasy, and with 1 page each on vehicles and siege weapons. Not nearly as much information as you have here. So we are now 6-4. All right, we're about halfway through here already. All right, so the dungeon and wilderness adventures and exploration in basic fantasy is very minimal, only taking up 3 pages of information, whereas you have more than a chapter's worth in the Rule Cyclopedia on each of these, and tables to go along with them. There are tables in this too, but it's just more expanded in the Rule Cyclopedia. So it's going to go up to 7 points. All right, monsters. Here's a big one. How many monsters do you have available in the game? The basic fantasy comes in at 188 monsters, and the monsters come in at 237 in the Rule Cyclopedia, so you get 49 more monsters if math works. And now keep in mind, that's 188 monsters is nothing to, turn your nose up at. That's really good. A lot of retro games don't even have that many. But you have 237 monsters, again 49 more, with a nice selection of rules to customize your monsters in this one. In the Rule Cyclopedia, you can even make them spellcasters and so on and so forth. So it's going to get another point. All right, and then it has a section on immortals, but I'm not really counting that. Record sheets. Basic Fantasy does not come with record sheets. You have to download them separately. Rule Cyclopedia does come with record sheets. Several different types, as a matter of fact. Let's see. You have a treasure. You have a pretty big section on treasure in here. It's decent in Basic Fantasy, but it is limited by comparison at only 15 pages of treasure information, whereas your treasure information is much more robust in the Rule Cyclopedia at over twice that, with 32 pages. So we have a much larger treasure section. Let's see. Rules for mass combat. Basic Fantasy is a no. I did not see any rules for mass combat. There's a whole chapter on mass combat in the Rule Cyclopedia. Does the Basic Fantasy come with built-in settings? No, it does not. But there are not one but two built-in settings in the Rule Cyclopedia. Let's see. Rules for building castles and kingdoms, or what they call domain play. This is very, very limited information in Basic Fantasy. Just enough to kind of pique your interest. But there's actually a lot of information about it in the Rule Cyclopedia. So it's going to get another point. All right. Is there a chapter on campaigning? No, none in the Basic Fantasy book, but there is in the Rule Cyclopedia, so it's going to go up another point. And lastly, the planes, which may not matter at the beginning, but they are going to matter at the end. Later on in the campaign, you're using stuff with the planes. So you don't get any of that in Basic Fantasy. You get a lot of detailed information about that in the Rule Cyclopedia. All right. So we're coming in at 12, 13, 14, 15 to 4. That's a pretty decisive victory. And some of it is conjecture. Some of it is, no, this book has more than the other book. Now, like I said in the beginning, my intent isn't to bash one over the other, because I've run a lot of Basic Fantasy over the last few years, and Basic Fantasy is a fantastic game. It really is. And where it does score the points, it scores them in a pretty good way, because it is nice to be able to say, hey, for less than $10, I'm into the game. You know, I got a set of dice, I got the book, and I can play, and I've spent more at McDonald's on lunch than I did to do this. It is a little bit pricier to get the Rule Cyclopedia, but I think that's justified in the extra amount of stuff that you're getting in the Rule Cyclopedia. Again, if the extra stuff is not stuff that you would use, you know, if you're not interested in campaigning rules or building kingdoms and domains and planes and stuff like that, then you can scratch those points right off and they may not matter to you. Then it just comes down to who has more monsters, who has more spells, things like that. And yeah, admittedly, the Rule Cyclopedia does come out on top on those, but the amount of spells and monsters that are available in Basic Fantasy are nothing to turn your nose up at. There's a lot here for you to do. I know, I've been doing it for quite some time. I introduced my kids to grown-up D&D, basically. They moved away from the kids' games with this Basic Fantasy a few years ago. And my kids have played a lot of games over the years, ICRPG, Basic Fantasy, White Box. You know, they've played a lot of different stuff, and now they're playing the Rule Cyclopedia, and they are BECMID&D, and they really enjoy it. So that's probably what we're going to stick with. There is still, I wouldn't get rid of my Basic Fantasy stuff or White Box or anything like that. All of this is still useful information. There's still some great ideas in here to pull from. Basic Fantasy especially has tons of free adventures that you can download. You can get print copies of most of them, or the other ones you can download and just use off the website. And they don't charge you anything for them, so that's a huge plus right there, especially if you're crunched for time and you don't want to write out a big adventure. You can go download adventures from basicfantasy.org, where you can get all of their books and roll with it. And it's just that simple. So while there is, obviously this was kind of just for fun, but while there is more options with the Rule Cyclopedia, there's still plenty you could do with Basic Fantasy. Again, like I said in the beginning of the video, the intent is not to bash one over the other. It is to simply illustrate the differences between the two. Somebody will point out, I'm sure, well, you didn't mention Thaco. They got Thaco, and that's just horrible. And it's not. It's super easy. It is just as easy as ascending armor class, in my opinion. It's not complicated. If you think it is, then you should probably revisit Thaco and read it again, especially from the BECMID perspective, because it's really easy. But I didn't include ascending versus descending armor class because that's really conjecture. Like, it's, do you like that? Do you not like that? Are you willing to try it? You're not willing to try it? There are other retro clones. Now, while Basic Fantasy only uses ascending armor class, White Box gives you the option to go either way. You can go ascending or descending, so depending on what you like. That's just more of a personal taste, so I didn't feel like it was worth scoring a point over. Not that these points mean anything at all. This is kind of like, whose line is it anyway? The points don't mean anything. Anyway, that's just kind of a look at the two, and like I said, both great games, and it just depends on how much meat you want on the bones of your game. If you want a little thinner book that's cheaper and easier to get into, then Basic Fantasy is fantastic. So is White Box and stuff like that. I think Basic Fantasy definitely has more to offer than White Box, but White Box is a good game, and I've done a video on that, so I'm not going to sit and compare those. But I had not done a video comparing the actual old school game to a retro clone that is emulating what you find in this book. So, in essence, this is going to sound bad. I don't mean it that way, but like, this is a shadow of what this is. It's not the full thing. It's just kind of hitting the highlights from this. And if you want the full, buffet, then get the Rule Cyclopedia. If you don't need some of that extra stuff that's in there, then get Basic Fantasy. Honestly, especially if money is an issue, because it's Basic Fantasy is easy to get your hands on. You can do print on demands. You can order it off of Amazon for less than $10. I mean, the hardback's a little more, but still, it's less than $20, and you're not going to buy a modern D&D book for that, not new. But that is a look at the two books, the differences between them. If you have any questions about some of the differences between them, feel free to put them in the comments. That's all I've got for right now. Until next time, my friends, good gaming and good luck.